The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty village square as Maria fell to her knees, her tears mixing with the mud beneath her. Kyle stood before her, his face an unreadable mask, scarred from years in the wilderness everyone thought had claimed him. His return should have been a moment of joy, but his words cut deeper than any knife. "You'll live," he said, turning away from her outstretched hand. "I'm not the man you remember." The villagers watched in silence, thinking they witnessed the end of a love story years in the making. What they didn't see was the way Kyle's fingers trembled at his side, or how his eyes darted to the hills beyond the village. What dark secret made this alpha Apache push away the only woman who ever truly loved him? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The creek babbled softly as Maria dipped her small hands into the cool mountain water. At 8 years old, her dark braids hung nearly to her waist, and determination creased her brow. Behind her, perched on a sun-warmed boulder, sat Kyle, 2 years older, all lean angles and watchful eyes. "You're splashing too much," he said quietly. "Fish feel the water move before they see your shadow." Maria huffed, but stilled her movements. "Show me again!" Kyle slid from the rock and crouched beside her, his movements fluid and silent. His hands entered the water without a ripple. Like this, still as stone until the last moment. The scar across his palm caught the sunlight, a reminder of the raid that had taken his parents 3 winters ago. The village elder Abraham had found him half frozen in the forest and brought him home. "The boy has no one," he told the suspicious townsfolk. "And we claim to be Christians." Maria watched Kale's face as he concentrated. Most children in the village avoided the Apache boy, but Maria found him fascinating. Her grandmother had warned her just that morning, "That boy has wildness in his blood. Best you stick with your own kind." But Kale was teaching her to fish when her own father had no time for such things. There, Kale's hands moved like lightning, and suddenly a silver trout wriggled in his grip. "See? Patience first, then speed." Maria clapped with delight. "Will you teach me to make a fire too? And track deer?" A rare half-smile flickered across his face. "Your grandmother would skin me alive. I don't care what she thinks." Maria's chin jutted stubbornly. "She's old and afraid of everything. She's right to be careful." Something ancient flickered in Kyle's young eyes. "People fear what they don't understand." A shout interrupted them, 3 boys from the village appearing through the pines. The largest, Thomas Miller, the blacksmith's son, pointed accusingly. "Pa says you stole a knife from his shop." Kale's body tensed. "I didn't steal anything. Liar." "Indians are all thieves." Thomas advanced, flanked by his friends. "Empty your pockets, savage." Maria stepped between them. "He didn't take anything. He's been with me since morning." "Move aside, Maria." Thomas was 12 and already had his father's bulk. "Your pa won't like you defending an Apache." "I don't care." "Kale is my friend." Thomas shoved her roughly. She stumbled, scraping her palms on the rocky shore. For a moment everything froze. Then Kale moved. There was nothing childlike in his stance as he faced the older boys. "You don't touch her." His voice was soft, but carried a weight beyond his years. "Ever." Something in his eyes made Thomas step back. "Keep your stolen knife. Everyone knows what you people are like." The boys retreated, throwing rocks that fell harmlessly short. Maria wiped blood from her scraped palm. "I'm sorry they said those things." Kyle knelt beside the creek, tearing a strip from his worn shirt. He dipped it in the cold water and wrapped it around her hand with surprising gentleness. "Words are just air, not when they hurt people." He paused, studying her with solemn eyes. "Why did you defend me?" "Your grandmother will be angry." "Because they were wrong." Maria shrugged as if the answer were obvious. "And you're teaching me to fish." That evening, Maria sat on her porch steps while her grandmother scolded her about that Apache boy and proper behavior for young ladies. Her attention drifted to the woods beyond their small homestead, where a shadow moved beneath the pines. Later, she found a small object on her windowsill, a bracelet made of tiny wooden beads, painstakingly carved and strung on sinew. Each bead had been dyed with berry juice and arranged in a pattern she didn't recognize. She slipped it on her wrist, hiding it beneath her sleeve. For years afterward, Maria kept the bracelet tucked inside a small tin box beneath her bed, taking it out only when she was alone. Sometimes she wondered about the pattern, all those interlocking triangles and lines. It wasn't until much later that she learned it was an Apache protection symbol. When she was 12, her father caught her wearing it while collecting eggs. "Where did you get this?" he demanded, examining the beadwork. "I found it," Maria lied, a skill she rarely employed but did so now without hesitation. Her father studied the pattern with narrowed eyes. "Looks like Indian work," he sighed, returning it to her wrist. "Keep it hidden from your grandmother." That night, Maria watched from her window as Cale brought a freshly killed rabbit to Abraham's door, his contribution to the household that had taken him in. She noticed how he moved differently now, less boy and more warrior with each passing season. "What will become of us?" she whispered to the bracelet, running her fingers over its familiar pattern. The question hung in the air, unanswered but heavy with possibility, as the first stars appeared above the mountain village where a girl and boy from different worlds had somehow found each other. Dawn painted the eastern sky with fingers of gold and crimson as Maria slipped through the silent village. At 18, she moved with practiced stealth, avoiding the creaking porch boards and loose stones that might betray her presence. Her heart thundered in her chest, not from exertion, but from what she was about to witness. No settler woman had ever seen an Apache coming-of-age ceremony. If discovered, the consequences would be severe for both her and Kyle. She climbed the ridge overlooking the ceremonial grounds, concealing herself behind a granite outcropping draped with scrub pine. Below, Apache men gathered in a circle, their faces solemn in the early light. Among them stood Kyle, now 20, his copper skin gleaming with sacred oils. The past decade had transformed the quiet boy into a man whose name was spoken with equal measures of respect and wariness throughout the valley. Too Apache for the settlers, too influenced by settler ways for some tribal elders, yet his skill as a hunter and his sense of fairness had carved him a unique place in both worlds. The village shaman approached Cale with a curved obsidian knife. Maria bit her lip to keep from crying out as the blade traced shallow cuts across Kyle's chest, 4 parallel lines representing the 4 directions. Cale's expression never changed, his eyes fixed on the distant mountains. "He carries pain well," whispered a voice beside her. Maria nearly tumbled from her hiding place. Crouching next to her was Abraham, the village elder who had raised Cale after finding him orphaned. His weathered face registered no surprise at her presence. "You shouldn't be here," he said, though there was no anger in his voice. "Neither should you," Maria countered softly. A smile creased the old man's face. "I was invited." Cale insisted an exception be made. Below them, the ceremony continued. The shaman presented Cale with a leather pouch. Inside it, Maria knew, would be the sacred items that would guide his spirit journey. "What will happen to him now?" she whispered. Abraham's gaze was steady. "He will walk into the wilderness for 4 days and nights. No food, no water, only the mountain and his courage for company. And if he succeeds, then he returns a man in the eyes of both his birth people and his adopted family." Abraham studied her face. "You care deeply for him." It wasn't a question. Maria didn't bother denying it. "That path leads nowhere but heartache, child." "I don't believe that." Her chin lifted stubbornly. Abraham sighed. "Your father came to speak with me yesterday. Thomas Miller has asked for your hand, the blacksmith's son, the same boy who had bullied Kyle all those years ago, now a burly young man with his father's forge and prospects." Maria felt cold despite the warming day. "I won't marry Thomas. Your father thinks otherwise. He sees a secure future. My father sees what he wishes to see." Abraham's voice gentled. "And what do you see when you look at Kyle?" Maria watched as Cale knelt before the tribal elders. "I see someone who belongs nowhere and everywhere. Like me, The old man nodded slowly. That is perhaps the truest thing I've heard spoken in many moons. He reached into his pocket and withdrew an object wrapped in deerskin. This is for you. She unwrapped it carefully. Inside lay a small medicine bundle, a leather amulet with intricate beadwork and herbs securely stitched inside. This was made by Kyle's mother before the raid that took her life, Abraham explained. I've kept it safe all these years. He asked me to give it to you before he left for his spirit journey. But why would he part with something so precious? Ask him when he returns. Abraham rose stiffly. If he returns. 4 days later, Maria tended her father's garden when she sensed, rather than heard, a presence behind her. She turned to find Kyle standing at the edge of the property, thinner and sun-darkened. But his eyes were clear and somehow older. Around his neck hung a single bear claw on a leather cord, the mark of his completed journey. Without thinking, Maria touched the medicine bundle hidden beneath her dress. That evening, as sunset cast long shadows across the valley, Maria slipped away to their childhood meeting place by the creek. Kyle was already there, perfectly still beside the rushing water. You could have died out there, she said without preamble, but I didn't. His voice had changed somehow, deeper, more certain. Abraham gave me your mother's medicine bundle. Kyle nodded once. So you would be protected while I was gone. And now? His dark eyes met hers. Now I am a man in the eyes of my people, and I can speak what a boy could not. The world seemed to hold its breath as he took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. The truth of their impossible situation hung between them, unspoken but acknowledged at last. The blacksmith's son has asked to court me, Maria said softly. Kyle's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. A shadow of the pain he had learned to bear in silence. And what did you tell him? I told him my heart speaks a different language. The mountain herbs would be most potent before the summer heat withered them. Maria had risen before dawn, leaving a note for her father that she was gathering medicinal plants for the village doctor. What she hadn't mentioned was how far into the hills she planned to venture. The eastern slope was known for rare yellow root that could break beavers, and it was also closer to Apache hunting grounds than the village elders would approve. Maria adjusted her gathering basket and pushed deeper into the pine forest, mindful of her footing on the steep terrain. By midday, her basket was half full with carefully wrapped bundles of herbs. She paused by a small spring to drink and rest, listening to the forest sounds. Something felt different. The usual birdsong had quieted. A prickling sensation crawled up her spine. She was being watched. Years of friendship with Kale had taught her to trust such instincts. Slowly, Maria reached for the hunting knife strapped to her ankle, hidden beneath her long skirt. She scanned the surrounding trees and boulders, searching for movement. The mountain lion appeared as if from nowhere, a tawny shadow flowing across the rocks above her. It was a female, lean and hungry-looking, regarding Maria with amber eyes that held neither malice nor mercy, only the cold calculation of a predator. Maria knew running would trigger the chase instinct. Instead, she stood tall and shouted, waving her arms as the village hunters had taught her. The mountain lion's ears flattened, but it didn't retreat. It crouched lower, tail twitching, preparing to pounce. Her knife seemed absurdly small now. Maria backed toward a stand of trees, hoping to put something solid behind her. She tripped on an exposed root and fell backward. The movement was enough to trigger the cat's instinct. It launched from the rock with terrifying grace. Maria screamed, slashing wildly with her knife as the beast's weight crashed onto her. Teeth snapped inches from her throat as she struggled to keep the animal at bay. Hot breath and the smell of raw meat assaulted her senses. A low whoosh cut the air, followed by a solid thunk. The mountain lion shrieked, rearing back with an arrow protruding from its shoulder. Before it could recover, a second arrow struck its flank. The wounded predator spun toward this new threat. Through the dust and confusion, Maria saw Kale emerging from the tree line, already notching a third arrow. His face was a mask of deadly concentration. The lion charged him. Kyle loosed his arrow at point-blank range. then dropped the bow and drew his hunting knife in one fluid motion. Man and beast collided in a blur of movement. They rolled across the ground, locked in mortal combat. Maria struggled to her feet, clutching her bloodied arm where the cat's claws had raked her. She staggered toward the fighting figures just as Cale's knife found the mountain lion's heart. The animal shuddered and went still. Silence reclaimed the forest. Cale rose slowly, his buckskin shirt torn and bloody. For a long moment they simply stared at each other, both breathing heavily. "Are you bitten?" he asked finally. Maria shook her head. "Just scratches." Her legs gave way, delayed shock setting in. Kyle caught her before she hit the ground. Without a word, he lifted her into his arms and began the long descent toward the village, leaving her gathering basket and the dead lion behind. "How did you find me?" she asked as he navigated the steep trail. "I was tracking elk when I heard your scream." His voice was tight. "You shouldn't be this far into the mountains alone. I've come this far before. Then you've been lucky before." His arms tightened around her. "The lions are hungrier this season. The drought has driven their prey higher into the mountains." Maria rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady thud of his heart. "Thank you for saving my life." He made no reply, but his steps slowed slightly, as if he were reluctant to reach the village, where he would have to relinquish her to others' care. Word traveled fast in the small community. By the time they emerged from the tree line, a small crowd had gathered. Her father pushed through, face ashen. "What happened?" he demanded, taking in Maria's bloodied appearance and the stoic Apache carrying her. "Mountain lion," Kyle said simply. "She needs the doctor." Thomas Miller stood at the edge of the crowd, his expression darkening as he watched Kyle carry Maria toward the doctor's cabin. "I'll fetch him," he said, hurrying ahead. The village doctor, a gruff Civil War veteran named Parker, cleaned and bandaged Maria's wounds while her father and Kyle waited outside. Through the cabin's thin walls, she could hear their conversation. "You have my gratitude," her father was saying stiffly. "If you hadn't been there—" "But I was," Kyle interrupted. "And now I must return." "Return? Return where?" "To the mountain. To claim the lion. The pelt and teeth are rightfully mine by Apache custom." The next morning, Maria woke to find a leather cord resting on her windowsill. Strung on it was a single curved claw, the longest from the mountain lion's paw, polished to a golden sheen. No note accompanied it, but none was needed. She slipped the necklace over her head, tucking the claw beneath her dress where it rested cool against her skin. A trophy, a reminder, a promise. Maria wasn't sure which, but she knew she would never take it off. Lanterns hung from every post around the village square, their golden light transforming the dusty gathering place into something almost magical. The Harvest Festival was the one night when the barriers between settlers and Apache seemed to thin, if not disappear entirely. Music from both cultures mingled in the autumn air, fiddles and drums finding unexpected harmony. Maria fastened her mother's amber earrings, the last gift before fever had taken her a decade ago. They caught the light as she tilted her head, examining her reflection in the small looking glass propped on her dresser. The scratches from the mountain lion had faded to pale lines across her arm. Beneath her high-necked blouse, the claw necklace rested against her skin, a constant reminder. "Maria," her father called from outside. "Thomas is here!" She closed her eyes briefly. After the mountain lion incident, her father had been more insistent about Thomas's courtship, perhaps hoping the blacksmith's son would keep her safely within the village boundaries. Thomas waited on their porch, hat in hand, hair slicked back with pomade. His eyes brightened at the sight of her. "You look lovely," he said with genuine admiration. Maria forced a smile. Thomas wasn't unkind, just not the one her heart chose. "Thank you for escorting me." The walk to the festival was filled with Thomas's plans for expanding his father's forge, perhaps adding a proper storefront come spring. Maria nodded at appropriate intervals, her attention drawn to the tree line where Apache fires glowed. Would Cale come tonight? The festival was already in full swing when they arrived. Tables groaned beneath the weight of harvest bounty. corn pudding, venison, apple pies, and stone jugs of cider, both sweet and hard. Children darted between adults, faces sticky with candy. Elder Burton had opened his barn for dancing, and fiddle music spilled into the night. "Would you like to dance?" Thomas asked, offering his arm. Before Maria could answer, a murmur rippled through the crowd. She turned to see a group of Apache entering the festival grounds. Their presence wasn't unusual. The harvest celebration had always been shared, but the reactions were for the tall figure at their center. Kyle walked with quiet dignity, dressed in a mixture of traditional Apache garments and settler clothing, buckskin pants, and a white cotton shirt open at the throat. What caused the stir, however, was his companion. Walking beside him was Naya, daughter of a respected Apache sub-chief. Beautiful and proud, she wore a dress of soft deerskin adorned with intricate beadwork. Her hand rested lightly on Cale's arm. Thomas's grip tightened. "Seems the Apache found himself a match," he said, not bothering to hide his satisfaction. Maria felt as though someone had knocked the wind from her lungs, but she kept her face carefully neutral. "Yes, it appears so. Dance with me," Thomas repeated, leading her toward the barn without waiting for an answer. The music swirled around them as Thomas guided her through the steps of a country reel. He was a competent dancer, his blacksmith's hands surprisingly gentle as he turned her. From the corner of her eye, Maria saw Kyle and Naya join the circle of Apache dancers near the bonfire, their movements fluid and in perfect harmony. After the third dance, Maria pleaded thirst. Thomas hurried to fetch cider, leaving her momentarily alone. She stepped outside, needing cool air to clear her head. Behind the barn, concealed from the main festivities, sat several barrels of hard cider. Maria filled a cup and drank it quickly, then another. The potent liquid burned down her throat, dulling the sharp edges of her thoughts. "That's stronger than you're used to." She turned to find Cale leaning against the barn wall, alone now, watching her with unreadable eyes. "Where's your companion?" Maria asked, hating how bitter the words tasted. "Naya is dancing with her cousins." He stepped closer. "She is not my companion in the way you think." "It doesn't matter what I think, doesn't it?" His voice lowered. "You're wearing my gift." His fingers brushed the outline of the claw necklace visible beneath her blouse. The touch, slight as it was, sent warmth cascading through her that had nothing to do with the cider. "You brought her to make me jealous." A ghost of a smile crossed his face.
"Did it work?"
Before she could answer, thunder rolled across the valley. Both looked up to see storm clouds blotting out the stars. The first heavy drops began to fall, sending festival-goers running for shelter. "Rain dance must have been too effective," Kyle murmured as the downpour intensified. People rushed past them, seeking refuge in the barn or hurrying home. In the confusion, no one noticed when Cale took Maria's hand, pulling her toward the nearby storage shed. They slipped inside just as the skies truly opened. The small space smelled of hay and apples, illuminated only by flashes of lightning through the single window. Rain drummed on the wooden roof, creating a world apart from the festival, from the village, from everything but this moment. "Naya is my cousin," Kyle said quietly. "She agreed to accompany me because unmarried Apache men are not supposed to attend gatherings alone." Relief flooded through Maria, followed immediately by shame at her jealousy. "I shouldn't care who you court, but you do." His hand found hers in the dimness. "As I care who courts you." A particularly brilliant flash of lightning illuminated his face, all sharp angles and contained intensity. In that frozen moment, Maria saw everything he kept hidden from the world, all the longing he mastered daily. When his lips found hers, it felt like the inevitable conclusion to a story begun years ago by the creek. His kiss was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. Her answer was to draw him closer, her fingers threading through his dark hair. The shed door banged open. Thomas stood silhouetted against the stormy night, his expression shifting from concern to shock to rage. "So this is why you needed air," he said, voice dangerously quiet. Cale stepped forward. "Thomas, don't speak my name, Apache." Thomas's fists clenched. "I should have known. Ever since we were children, you've taken what isn't yours." Maria moved between them. "I'm not property to be taken." The tension crackled like the lightning overhead. For a terrible moment, Maria thought they might come to blows. Then Thomas stepped back. "Your father will hear about this," he said flatly, before disappearing into the rain. In the sudden silence, Cale reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, a carved wooden flute, simple but beautiful. "I made this to play at the festival," he said, pressing it into her hands. "Now it will have to speak when I cannot." The first snow came early that year, blanketing the valley in hushed white before the last autumn leaves had fallen. Maria stood at her window, watching crystalline flakes swirl in the grey morning light. 3 weeks had passed since the harvest festival, 3 weeks since Thomas had spoken to her father. The aftermath had been as harsh as expected, restrictions, lectures, and watchful eyes that made meeting with Kyle nearly impossible. She pressed her hand against the cold glass, leaving a ghostly imprint. Somewhere beyond the white-laden pines, Cale was preparing for the winter hunt. Apache hunters would range far to find game in this weather, perhaps not returning for days. A sharp knock at the front door interrupted her thoughts. Maria listened as her father's heavy footsteps crossed the cabin floor. Murmured voices followed, one clearly the village doctor. "Maria," her father called, his voice strained. "Come quickly!" She hurried downstairs to find Dr. Parker removing his snow-covered coat. His weathered face was grim. "Fevers spreading through the village," he explained, setting his medical bag on the table. 3 families sick already, and I need help. Your knowledge of herbs might make the difference." Her father frowned. "Is it dangerous?" "All fevers are dangerous, Joseph," Parker replied. "But your daughter has a healer's touch. I've seen it." An hour later, Maria followed the doctor from house to house, carrying his supplies and preparing the remedies he prescribed. The Wilkinsons were worst afflicted, 3 children and their mother burning with fever, the youngest barely 2 years old. As dusk approached, more families reported symptoms. The doctor looked exhausted, his confidence wavering. "We're running low on willow bark," he told Maria as they trudged through deepening snow. "And I'd give my right arm for some of that yellow root that grows on the eastern slopes." "I know where it grows," Maria said. "I could go tomorrow." Parker shook his head. "Too dangerous in this weather, especially alone." That night Maria couldn't sleep. The sound of the toddler's labored breathing haunted her. Before dawn, she dressed in her warmest clothes and slipped from the cabin, leaving a note explaining her mission to gather medicine. The forest was transformed by snow, familiar landmarks obscured beneath white drifts. The eastern path would be impassable, but Maria knew another way, a longer route that followed the creek before climbing the ridge. It would take most of the day, but she could be back by nightfall. The journey proved harder than anticipated. By midday, the wind had risen, driving snow into blinding sheets. Maria pulled her scarf tighter and pressed on, finally reaching the sheltered ravine where yellow root grew. Her fingers were numb as she dug through snow to the frozen ground, using her knife to pry loose the precious roots. With her bag full, she turned back, but the strengthening storm had erased her tracks. Visibility reduced to mere feet, Maria struggled to maintain her sense of direction. The temperature dropped rapidly as daylight faded. Fear crept in, cold and insistent as the wind. She was lost. Stumbling through knee-deep snow, Maria spotted a dark shape ahead, the abandoned trapper's cabin that hunters sometimes used. She nearly wept with relief as she pushed open the door. Inside was simple shelter, a stone fireplace, rough-hewn table, and pallet bed. More surprising was the small fire already burning and the figure that rose from beside it. "Cale," she whispered, suddenly light-headed. He moved quickly to steady her. "What are you doing in the mountains during a storm?" Maria explained about the fever spreading through the village, showing him the roots she'd collected. His expression softened. "You risked your life for this medicine." "People will die without it." She swayed slightly. "Children." Kyle guided her to the fire, removing her snow-crusted outer garments and wrapping a buffalo hide around her shoulders. Only then did she notice the fresh meat hanging from the rafters. His hunting had been successful. "You can't travel in this storm," he said, stoking the fire. "We'll leave at first light." The implications settled between them. A night alone, unchaperoned, miles from the village. If anyone discovered this, her reputation would be beyond salvage. "My father will be frantic," she murmured. "Better worried than mourning." Cale's voice was gentle but firm. "The storm would claim you before you reached the valley." He prepared a simple meal of venison and dried berries, watching as color returned to her cheeks. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing, rattling the cabin's shutters. "Why did you become a healer?" Kyle asked as they sat before the fire. Maria considered the question. "I couldn't save my mother when the fever took her. Perhaps I'm trying to balance that debt. The spirits don't keep ledgers of our failures," he said quietly. "Don't they? What about your parents? Isn't protecting the village your way of honoring them?" His silence was answer enough. As night deepened, the single pallet became an unavoidable question. Cale solved it by sitting with his back against the wall, gesturing for her to take the bed. "Sleep," he said. "I'll keep watch." But sleep proved elusive with him, so near yet deliberately distant. In the firelight, Maria studied his profile, the straight nose, the strong jaw, the scar that traced his left cheekbone. "Cale," she said softly, "I'm not sorry the storm brought me here." He turned to look at her, firelight dancing in his dark eyes. "Nor am I. But come morning, we return to what must be." Before dawn, Maria woke to find Kyle placing something beside her, a small deerskin pouch filled with dried herbs and tied with a braided leather cord. "Apache medicine," he explained when he saw she was awake, "for the fever. More potent than your yellow root, but the knowledge is guarded." She recognized the risk he took in sharing tribal secrets. "Thank you." "It isn't for you," he said with the hint of a smile. "It's for the children." The storm had passed, leaving the world crystalline and still. They traveled swiftly down the mountain, Kyle breaking trail through deep snow. At the edge of the forest, within sight of the village, he stopped. "This is where we part." He touched the medicine pouch at her waist. "Tell them you found it abandoned in a hunter's cache if anyone asks." Maria nodded, understanding the necessary deception. "When will I see you again?" Instead of answering, Cale reached into his shirt and pulled out a small object, a hollowed reed whistle with holes precisely carved along its length. "When you hear this sound after dusk," he said, demonstrating a distinctive three-note call, "I will be waiting by the lightning oak at the south pasture." She took the whistle, their fingers brushing. "Be careful. Thomas has been watching the boundaries since the festival. Some risks are worth taking." His eyes held hers for a moment longer before he turned back to the forest, quickly vanishing among the snow-laden pines. Spring came to the valley in a rush of green and gold, melting winter's grip and breathing new life into the land. Wild roses climbed across the cemetery fence where Maria knelt beside her mother's grave, clearing away dead leaves and placing fresh wildflowers on the weathered stone. "I wish you were here to advise me," she whispered. "Father doesn't understand, and grandmother only sees the world as it was in her youth, not as it could be." Throughout the winter, Maria and Cale had maintained their secret meetings, brief encounters by the lightning oak, whispered conversations in the shadows of the stable during village gatherings. Each meeting was a risk, but one that fed their souls through the cold months. Now with lengthening days came new possibilities and new dangers. 3 nights ago, Kyle had asked her to meet him today at their childhood creek. Something in his voice suggested a turning point. Maria touched her mother's headstone one last time before rising. The morning was still young, the village stirring with daily routines. She had told her father she would be gathering spring herbs, which wasn't entirely untrue. Her basket contained several small trowels and cloth bags for such a purpose. The creek ran full with snowmelt, its voice louder than she remembered. This place held their beginning, where a boy had taught a girl to fish with bare hands, where friendship had first blossomed despite cultural divisions. Maria settled on a sun-warmed rock to wait. She didn't hear Kyle approach. She never did, but sensed his presence moments before he emerged from the trees. He carried a small leather pack, and something about his demeanor struck her as formal, almost ceremonial. "You came," he said, though there had never been doubt. "Of course." She studied his face, noting new lines around his eyes. Winter had been hard on the Apache, game scarce despite skilled hunters. Kyle sat beside her, their shoulders not quite touching. For a while they listened to the creek's song, comfortable in shared silence. "I've been trading with settlers from the Eastern Territories," he finally said. "Furs for things we cannot make ourselves. Is that wise? The village elders don't control my actions." Something in his voice had hardened. "Not anymore." Maria turned to face him fully. "What's happened?" "Abraham is dying." The pain in those 3 words was palpable. "The winter took too much from him. Before the next full moon, he will join his ancestors. Abraham, the village elder who had rescued the orphaned Kyle, who had raised him between 2 worlds, the only father he had known since the raid. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, taking his hand. Kyle's fingers tightened around hers. "With his passing, the last voice that speaks for me among the elders will be silent. Some already say I've been too influenced by settler ways. Others claim I'm not Apache enough nor white enough to be trusted. What will you do?" "What I should have done months ago." He reached into his pack and withdrew something that gleamed in the dappled sunlight, a simple band of silver, hammered and polished to a soft sheen. "I traded the finest pelts from my winter hunt for a silver coin. A Blackfoot trader showed me how to work the metal." Maria's heart stuttered in her chest as he held the ring between them. "In your tradition," he said carefully, "a man offers a ring when he asks a woman to join her life to his." "Kyle!" her voice caught. "Let me finish." His expression was solemn. "I've built a cabin 3 valleys east of here. Good land, clean water, far enough from both our peoples that we might find peace, yet close enough to trade when necessary. You want us to leave everything and everyone? I want us to start something new, something that doesn't force us to live divided." He took a deep breath. "I'm asking you to be my wife, Maria. Not by Apache ways or settler ways, but by our own." The ring balanced on his palm, crude compared to crafted jewelry from eastern cities, yet infinitely more precious. It represented everything forbidden, everything desired. "My father will never agree," she said softly. "I'm not asking your father. I'm asking you." The weight of the decision pressed upon her. To leave the village would mean abandonment of family, security, identity. Yet to stay meant denying the truth that had grown between them since childhood. Before she could answer, a twig snapped in the forest behind them. Kyle was on his feet instantly, the ring disappearing into his palm. Thomas Miller stepped into the clearing, rifle cradled in his arms. His expression shifted from surprise to cold anger. "Trespassing on settler land, Apache?" His voice carried a warning. "This creek divides the territories," Kyle replied evenly. "I stand where I have right to stand." Thomas's gaze moved to Maria, then back to Kyle. Convenient meeting place. Almost like it was planned. Maria stood, positioning herself slightly between them. "I'm gathering spring herbs, Thomas. We happened upon each other, like you happened upon each other at the festival." His knuckles whitened on the rifle. "The whole village knows about you two. They just don't say it aloud out of respect for your father." The accusation hung in the spring air, true enough that denial would only insult them all. Maria lifted her chin. "What I do is not the village's concern. It is when it involves consorting with—" "Choose your next words carefully," Kyle interrupted, his voice dangerously soft. Thomas adjusted his grip on the rifle. "Your father asked me to find you," he said to Maria, ignoring Kyle entirely. "Military convoys coming through. They've requested your healing skills for some injured men." Maria hesitated, torn between obligation and the unfinished moment with Kyle. "Go," Kyle said quietly. "This isn't the time for decisions." She gathered her basket, painfully aware of Thomas's watchful eyes. As she moved past Kyle, he pressed something into her palm, not the ring, but a small leather pouch containing a tarnished brass compass. Its needle wavering before settling due east. "To find your way," he murmured. "When you're ready to answer." The military convoy brought more than wounded soldiers to the valley. It brought change, sweeping over the community like the thunderheads that gathered on the western horizon. 6 wagons, 20 soldiers, and 1 Lieutenant Marshal Clark, a West Point graduate with orders from the territorial governor. Maria worked in the makeshift infirmary set up in Elder Burton's barn. Most injuries were minor: a broken arm from a wagon accident, saddle sores, a fever that responded well to her herbal remedies. The men treated her with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. This settler woman who mixed frontier knowledge with Apache healing techniques. "You have unusual methods," Lieutenant Clark observed, watching her prepare a poultice for a young private's infected wound. "They work," she replied simply. "Indeed." His keen eyes missed nothing. "Where did you learn them?" Maria carefully measured her response. "I've lived in this valley all my life." "One learns from observation, and from the local tribes, perhaps." There was no accusation in his tone, only calculated interest. Before she could answer, the barn door swung open. Her father entered with Thomas and several village elders. Their expressions told her something significant had transpired. "Lieutenant," her father addressed the officer, "the council has considered your proposal. We'll provide the supplies you've requested." Clark nodded, satisfied. "Excellent. My men will begin collecting them immediately." Maria caught Thomas's eye. "What supplies?" The lieutenant answered instead. "Standard requisition for frontier operations. Grain, preserved meat, wagons, and scouts," her father added, not meeting her gaze. "Thomas has volunteered." Understanding bloomed cold in her chest. "What frontier operations?" An uncomfortable silence fell. Finally, Elder Burton spoke. "The territorial governor has ordered a relocation of all Apache in the region to the new reservation 50 miles south." Relocation. The word felt wrong in her mouth. "You mean forced removal?" "We mean peace, Miss Rivera," Lieutenant Clark said smoothly. "The territory is changing. Settlers arrive daily. The old ways of separated coexistence are no longer sustainable, so you'll drive people from lands they've inhabited for generations. We'll escort them to safer territory, away from the coming railroad and the conflicts it would inevitably bring." Clark's tone remained reasonable, as if explaining simple logic to a child. "It's for their own protection. Have you informed the Apache Council of your plans for their protection?" Something flickered in the lieutenant's eyes. "Official communication will be delivered tomorrow." Maria looked at the village elders, men she'd known her entire life, and saw the conflict in their expressions. Some seemed troubled, others resigned, a few nodding in agreement with the lieutenant's words. "This is wrong," she said quietly. Her father stepped forward. "Maria, that's enough. The lieutenant has his orders, and we have our community to consider." That night, Maria paced her small room, the compass heavy in her pocket. The decision she had delayed at the creek now pressed upon her with unbearable weight. She had to warn Kyle. The Apache needed time to prepare, to decide their response. When the house fell silent, Maria slipped outside. The 3/4 moon provided enough light to navigate the familiar path to the lightning oak. She blew softly into the reed whistle, its distinctive call carrying through the still night. Minutes passed with no response. She tried again, waiting longer this time, ears straining for any sound of approach. Nothing. Perhaps he was hunting far from the village, or meeting with his people. On impulse, she pulled out the compass. Its needle gleamed in the moonlight, pointing steadily eastward toward the cabin he had built for them. Would he be there instead? It was a half-night's journey by foot, but she could make it before dawn. As Maria gathered her resolve, a hand closed firmly over her mouth. She struggled briefly until a familiar voice whispered, "Quiet. Soldiers." Kyle released her slowly, his expression grave in the moonlight. "Why are you out alone?" "It's dangerous. I had to warn you," she whispered. "There's a military convoy in the village." They have orders to relocate all Apache to the southern reservation. His face hardened. When? Soon. They're gathering supplies now. Thomas has volunteered as a scout. Cale absorbed this, calculating implications. How many soldiers? 20 that I've seen. More may join them. She clutched his arm. What will your people do? Some will go peacefully, hoping to preserve lives. Others... He didn't need to finish. There will be fighting if they resist. There will be fighting regardless, Kyle said with cold certainty. This isn't about protection. It's about the gold discovered in the eastern foothills. Apache land. Maria felt sick. No wonder the lieutenant had evaded her questions. Come away with me, she pleaded suddenly. To the cabin you built. Tonight. For a moment longing crossed his features, quickly replaced by resolve. I cannot abandon my people now. Then I'll come with you. Help your people prepare. Kyle shook his head. You'd be caught between worlds, trusted by neither. His hands framed her face. If you truly want to help, stay in the village. Learn what you can about their plans. You're asking me to spy on my own people? I'm asking you to help prevent a slaughter. His voice softened. Abraham died this morning. His last words were about you, about us. He believed our love might someday bridge the divide between our peoples. Grief for the kind old man mingled with the weight of this new responsibility. Maria nodded slowly. Kyle reached inside his shirt and withdrew a small object, a bone gaming piece carved into the shape of a wolf, worn smooth from years of handling. Abraham's token, he explained, given to him by his father and his father before him. He wanted you to have it. Kyle pressed it into her palm. If you're ever in danger, show this to any Apache. They will know you as family and offer protection. What about you? When will I see you again? His eyes held hers, memorizing every detail. When the time comes, I'll find you. A distant voice called Maria's name, her father discovering her absence. Go, Kyle urged. Remember, learn what you can. Lives depend on it now. He melted into the darkness as Maria hurried back toward the village. The carved wolf clutched tightly in her hand, a talisman of protection, a symbol of adoption, and now a commitment to a dangerous new path. Days stretched into weeks. Spring deepened into early summer, wildflowers carpeting the valley floor, while tension thickened the air like the approach of an inevitable storm. Maria moved through the village like a ghost. Listening at doorways and during council meetings her father attended, gathering fragments of information to pass along during rare, hurried meetings with Kyle. The Apache had refused the relocation order. Some families had slipped away in the night, seeking refuge with distant relatives in the high country. Others remained defiant, prepared to defend their ancestral lands. Lieutenant Clark had requested reinforcements from Fort Denison. It's only a matter of time, Thomas told Maria's father over dinner, unaware that she listened from the kitchen. The Apache don't have the numbers or weapons to resist a proper military campaign. Maria dropped a plate deliberately, interrupting their conversation. Thomas had become a regular presence in their home, his status elevated by his role with the military. He watched her with a mixture of lingering affection and growing suspicion. Sorry, she murmured, cleaning up the broken pieces. That night, unable to sleep, Maria sat by her window watching moonlight silver the distant mountains. The carved wolf token rested in her palm, smooth and cool against her skin. She hadn't seen Kyle in 3 days, their usual meeting place too closely watched by military patrols. A flash of movement caught her eye, a rider galloping toward the village, his urgency evident even at a distance. She dressed quickly and slipped downstairs as the rider pounded on Elder Burton's door across the street. Apache raiding party hit the supply wagons. The man's voice carried in the still night. 3 soldiers dead. The village erupted like a disturbed beehive. Lanterns flared to life, men gathered with rifles, women clustered in doorways. Lieutenant Clark emerged from the guest quarters, buckling his gun belt. Secure the perimeter, he ordered his sergeants. No one in or out. Maria's father found her on the porch. Get inside, he commanded, rifle in hand. And stay there. She obeyed, but only long enough to collect her shawl and the small bag of medical supplies she kept ready. If there were injured soldiers returning, they would need her help. More importantly, she needed to learn exactly what had happened. The village square had become a staging area, soldiers and settler men organizing into defensive groups. Maria approached Lieutenant Clark, who was studying a rough map spread on a wagon tailgate. "I'm here to help with the wounded," she said. Clark barely glanced up. "Good, we'll need you. Patrols bringing them in. Who led the raid?" she asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. Now he did look at her, eyes narrowing slightly. "Why do you ask?" "To know what kinds of injuries to expect," she improvised. "Different warriors favor different weapons." The lieutenant studied her for a moment before answering. "Witnesses described a tall Apache. Facial scar. Your friends call him Kale." Maria's heart stuttered, but she kept her expression carefully blank. "He's not my friend." "No?" Clark folded the map deliberately. "Thomas Miller seems to think otherwise." Before she could respond, riders approached from the south road, soldiers supporting wounded comrades. Maria moved quickly to help, professional instincts taking over as she directed the injured to the infirmary. The night passed in a blur of blood and bandages. None of the new injuries proved fatal, though 2 men would carry scars for life. As dawn broke, Maria stepped outside for air. Exhausted from hours of intensive care, Thomas found her there, his expression grim. "They're organizing a pursuit party. Lieutenant Clark wants every available man. They'll be miles away by now," Maria said. "Maybe not." Thomas lowered his voice. "A prisoner was taken during the raid. Says he knows where they're camped." Cold dread washed through her. "What prisoner?" "Young Apache brave. Barely more than a boy." Maria recognized the description immediately. No, she, Kyle's 16-year-old cousin, who had only recently earned warrior status. "Where is he now?" Thomas hesitated. "The storehouse." "But Maria, don't—" She was already moving, threading through the busy square toward the small stone building at its edge. 2 guards blocked her path. "I need to check the prisoner," she said firmly. "Lieutenant's orders." A half-truth at best, but delivered with enough authority that they stepped aside. Inside, she found Noshi slumped against the wall, hands bound, face bruised and swollen from rough treatment. "Water," he rasped when he saw her. Maria knelt beside him, offering her canteen. As he drank, she whispered in broken Apache, "Where is Kale?" The young warrior's eyes widened slightly before narrowing with suspicion. "I'm a friend," she assured him, showing the wolf token. "Abraham's family." Recognition flickered across his face. "Eastern caves," he murmured. "But soldiers come soon. He must go. I'll get word to him." Maria pressed the token into Noshi's hand. "Keep this hidden. Show it only to Kale if you see him again." The door opened behind her. Lieutenant Clark entered, Thomas at his shoulder. "Miss Rivera," Clark said coldly, "I don't recall authorizing you to interrogate the prisoner." "I'm providing medical attention," she replied, rising to her feet, "as I would for any human being. Your compassion is admirable if misplaced." Clark gestured to the guards. "Escort Miss Rivera back to the infirmary. She's needed there." That afternoon, the pursuit party departed, 20 soldiers and 10 settler volunteers, including Thomas. Maria watched from the infirmary window, sick with worry. She had no way to warn Kale about Noshi's capture or the information he might have revealed under duress. 3 days passed with no news. Then, as dusk gathered on the 3rd day, riders returned. They carried fewer men than had departed, and their expressions told the story before words could. "Ambush in the eastern canyons," her father reported grimly that evening. Apache fighters were waiting. 8 men lost, including 3 villagers. "Thomas?" Maria asked, hating herself for hoping he might be among the casualties. Wounded but alive. He led the survivors back. Later, Maria slipped into the infirmary where Thomas lay, a bandage wrapped around his shoulder. His eyes opened at her approach. "You should have seen him, Maria," he said hoarsely. "You're Apache. Fighting like 10 men. He's not the same person we grew up with. What happened?" she asked quietly. "We followed the prisoner's information to the caves. They were waiting. Your friend," Thomas's eyes hardened, "he executed 2 soldiers who surrendered. Shot them with their own rifles." Maria shook her head. "Kyle wouldn't do that." "The Kyle you knew is gone," Thomas reached for something beside his cot. "We found this in the aftermath. One of the men tore it from him during the fighting. He pressed an object into her hand, a leather cord strung with 5 military brass buttons. Blood darkened the leather, dried black in the crevices. The makeshift necklace felt heavy with implication, each button likely representing a soldier killed. They're calling him Ghost Wolf now," Thomas said. "There's a price on his head." Maria closed her fingers around the grisly trophy, its meaning clear. The boy who had taught her to fish, the young man who had carved her a flute, the suitor who had fashioned her a silver ring. He was transforming into something harder, deadlier. War had claimed him, just as surely as it would eventually claim them all. Autumn came and went in a blur of skirmishes and reprisals. By the time the first snow fell, the conflict had settled into an uneasy stalemate. The Apache had withdrawn deeper into the mountains, conducting swift, devastating raids before disappearing into terrain they knew intimately. The military maintained control of the valley floor, but couldn't venture into the highlands without suffering heavy losses. The village had changed. New fortifications surrounded its perimeter, and soldiers patrolled day and night. Some families had departed for safer territories, while others from outlying homesteads had moved in, seeking protection. Maria's role as healer had expanded. She now served as the primary medical provider for both villagers and the military garrison. Dr. Parker having been recalled to Fort Denison. "You need an assistant," Lieutenant Clark told her one evening as she finished treating a young soldier's frostbitten fingers. "The cold brings more casualties than bullets these days." Maria wiped her hands on her apron. "Sarah Williams has been helping. She has steady hands." Clark nodded, his attitude toward Maria having evolved from suspicion to grudging respect over the months. "I'll arrange for supplies to be delivered tomorrow. The supply wagons made it through the mountain pass yesterday. Any news from the territorial governor?" "Nothing that would interest you." His tone suggested otherwise. Maria had learned to read between the lines of such statements. "More troops coming?" Clark studied her for a moment. "You have remarkable intuition, Miss Rivera." "Not intuition, logic." She began organizing her medicines. "Winter makes mountain fighting impossible. Spring will bring reinforcements and a new campaign." Perhaps. The lieutenant's gaze was calculating. "Though spring might also bring opportunities for negotiation." The word hung in the air between them. Negotiation meant the military was no longer certain of easy victory. The Apache resistance, led by the increasingly legendary Ghost Wolf, had proved more effective than anyone anticipated. Later that night, alone in her room, Maria unwrapped a small package hidden beneath the floorboards. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with her neat handwriting. For 6 months, she had recorded everything: troop movements, supply deliveries, snippets of military planning overheard during treatments. Information she had no way to deliver to Cale, but kept faithfully nonetheless. She opened to a fresh page and wrote the date, followed by "Supply wagons arrived." Lieutenant Clark hinted at spring reinforcements, but also mentioned possible negotiations. Ghost Wolf's reputation grows. Soldiers speak of him with fear now, not contempt. Maria paused, pen hovering over the paper. After a moment's hesitation, she added, "I still look for you at every shadow's edge. The compass points east, but I remain bound by duty and circumstance. Are you still the man who carved me a flute, or has the war consumed that part of you entirely?" She closed the journal and returned it to its hiding place. Outside, snow fell in thick, silent curtains, blanketing the world in pristine white that would soon be trampled and stained. Winter deepened. Christmas came and went with subdued celebration. Maria's father fell ill with a persistent cough that worried her, though he dismissed her concerns. Thomas Miller had been promoted to civilian liaison between the village and military command, his injury having healed enough for light duty. He still sought opportunities to speak with Maria, his manner suggesting he had not abandoned hope of eventually winning her. January brought the coldest days anyone could remember. Wolves grew bold, venturing close to the village in search of food. Some whispered they were Apache spirit animals, sent to scout for Ghost Wolf's warriors. Then came the night of the new moon, the darkest night of the month. Maria woke to the faintest of sounds outside her window, a deliberate tapping that might have been mistaken for a branch in the wind. She froze, listening intently. The pattern repeated. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. Heart-pounding, she slipped from her bed and moved silently to the window. The night revealed nothing but swirling snow and shadows. Maria. The whisper came from directly below her window, a voice she would recognize anywhere despite the months of separation. She unlatched the window, heedless of the cold air that rushed in. Kyle's face appeared, partially concealed by a fur-lined hood. He was thinner, his cheekbones more prominent, but his eyes remained the same, dark and intense. "You're here," she breathed, scarcely believing. "Not for long. Patrols pass every 20 minutes. His gaze searched her face hungrily. "I needed to see you. It's too dangerous. If they catch you, they won't." A ghost of his old smile flickered across his face. "I didn't earn my new name by being careless." Maria reached through the window to touch his face, needing physical confirmation of his presence. The button necklace. Thomas says what serves him." Kyle's expression hardened. "I fight to protect my people. I take no pleasure in death. There's a price on your head." "I know." He caught her hand, pressing something into her palm. "I don't have much time. Spring will bring either peace or greater war. Either way, you need to be prepared." Maria looked down at the object he'd given her, a small, ornate key of unusual design. "What is this?" "It opens a strongbox buried beneath the lightning oak. Inside you'll find gold and papers, enough to take you far from here if needed." His voice softened. "And something else I've kept safe for you." "The ring?" He nodded once. "My offer stands. But now there's more at stake than just our future." "What do you mean?" "The territorial governor has sent peace envoys. They wish to meet with Apache leaders, including me." His expression grew grave. "Some of my people believe it's a trap. Others think we should negotiate while we still have leverage. What do you believe?" "I believe I'm tired of fighting." Kyle's hand tightened around hers. "But I've seen too much treachery to trust easily." A distant voice called out, "The changing of the guard." Kyle tensed. "I must go. If you need to reach me, use the old signal at the creek bend." "No, she survived. He watches that place every 3rd day." "Kyle, wait. There were too many things to say. Too many questions. Keep the key hidden. Trust no one." He hesitated, then added softly, "I am still the man who carved your flute. Maria, but I am other things now too." Then he was gone, melting into the swirling snow as if he'd never been there at all. Only the small key in her hand and the lingering warmth of his touch proved she hadn't dreamed the encounter. Maria closed the window against the bitter cold, turning the key over in her fingers. Made of brass, with an intricate bow shaped like intertwined wolves, it represented both practical escape and symbolic promise. Whatever spring brought, peace, war, or some uneasy combination, Kyle had provided a path forward. She tucked the key into the medicine bundle he had given her so long ago, whispering a prayer to whatever spirits might be listening, Apache or Christian. "Keep him safe," she breathed, "and help us find our way back to each other." February yielded reluctantly to March, snow giving way to mud as the valley slowly awakened. With the thaw came visitors. The first, traders brave or foolish enough to navigate the mountain. Passes before they were fully clear, Maria was inventorying her dwindling medical supplies when commotion in the village square drew her attention. A lone rider had arrived, a weathered man with a pack mule laden with goods. Not unusual in itself, but the villagers' reactions suggested something notable about this particular trader. "He's been to Apache territory," Sarah Williams whispered as Maria joined the gathering crowd. "Says he trades with them regularly." Lieutenant Clark and his men approached the trader with obvious suspicion. "State your business," Clark demanded. The trader dismounted unhurriedly. He was older than he'd first appeared, perhaps 50, with silver-streaked hair tied back and eyes that missed nothing. "James Blackwood," he introduced himself. I trade goods to those willing to pay, regardless of their heritage or allegiances. Trading with hostiles is treasonous, Clark warned. Blackwood smiled thinly. I have written authorization from the territorial governor to conduct commerce with all parties. Part of his peace initiative, he produced a folded document bearing an official seal, especially needed now that representatives are preparing for the Spring Council. Clark examined the document with evident displeasure before returning it. Keep your activities transparent, Mr. Blackwood. This is still a military jurisdiction. The traders' goods proved eclectic: coffee and sugar, bolts of fabric, tools, seeds for spring planting, and more unusual items: Apache-made baskets, beadwork, and small carvings. Maria browsed his wares, searching for herbs she couldn't find locally. The healer, I presume, Blackwood said, approaching her as she examined a packet of dried plants. How did you know? Your hands. His gaze was shrewd. They bear the stains of someone who works with medicines. Besides, your reputation extends beyond this village. Maria stiffened. What reputation is that? A skilled healer who treats all who need care regardless of origin. Blackwood lowered his voice. Some say you understand Apache medicine as well. She measured her response carefully. I've learned from many sources, as have I. He selected a small cloth bundle from his pack. These might interest you. Rare fungus from the eastern slopes, valued for its properties against infection. The bundle contained exactly what she needed most. Medicines impossible to obtain through military channels. How much? For you? A conversation. Blackwood gestured toward the edge of the square. I've traveled far and heard many stories. I'm curious if they align with reality. Once they were beyond easy earshot, he spoke more directly. The one they call Ghost Wolf. He's more than just a warrior, isn't he? Some say he's working toward peace while fighting for his people's survival. Maria's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. Why would I know anything about Apache matters? Perhaps you don't. Blackwood's eyes crinkled. But if someone wished to get a message to him, hypothetically, I might be in a position to assist. That would be dangerous for everyone involved. Peace is always dangerous. It threatens those who profit from conflict. Maria studied him, weighing risk against possibility. What kind of message? The Peace Council is scheduled for the first full moon of spring. 6 Apache leaders have been invited, Ghost Wolf among them. Blackwood adjusted his hat. But there are factions on both sides who would prefer the fighting continue. The Apache need to know which military leaders can be trusted and which cannot. Why tell me this? Because someone who treats wounded from both sides might have unique insights into men's characters. He shrugged. Or perhaps I've misread the situation entirely. Their conversation was interrupted by Thomas, who approached with obvious suspicion. Everything all right, Maria? Mr. Blackwood was just showing me some medicinal herbs, she replied smoothly. Lieutenant Clark wants to speak with you, Thomas told the trader, clearly dismissing him. Blackwood nodded politely and moved away, but not before pressing something into Maria's hand, a small leather pouch containing the herbs and something else, something hard. That evening, alone in her room, Maria emptied the pouch. Among the dried fungi fell a small object that gleamed in the lamplight, a miniature playing card carved from bone, the Ace of Spades. She turned it over to find a message etched on the back, friends in unexpected places. Eastern Ridge, 3 days, midnight. The card was exquisitely crafted, the spade symbol inlaid with black stone that caught the light. Such an object had no practical use. It was too small for actual play, yet its craftsmanship suggested significance beyond mere decoration. For 2 days, Maria debated the wisdom of meeting this stranger who seemed to know too much. Was it a trap? Military intelligence trying to confirm her connection to Kale? Or a genuine offer of assistance from an independent party? On the 3rd night, she made her decision. Slipping out after her father was asleep, Maria used the shadows and her intimate knowledge of village patterns to evade the night patrols. The Eastern Ridge was a risky meeting. Place, visible from certain sentry positions if they knew where to. look, but also provided clear views of approaching danger. Blackwood was already there when she arrived, sitting calmly on a boulder as if waiting for an old friend. "I wasn't certain you would come," he said without preamble. Neither was I. Maria remained standing, alert for any sign of deception. "Why involve yourself in matters that could get you killed?" "I've known the Apache for 30 years, he replied. "Married one of their women before she passed. I've watched the government break treaty after treaty." His eyes hardened. "But this time could be different if the right people have correct information." "What information?" "Lieutenant Clark reports to Colonel Jessup, a man determined to make his name through military victory, not diplomatic success. 3 days ago, I overheard Clark discussing how to use the Peace Council to identify all remaining Apache leadership." Blackwood's voice was grim. "They plan to end the resistance by eliminating its head." Maria felt cold, despite the mild spring night. "They'll massacre the council delegates, unless someone warns them." He held her gaze steadily. "Someone they trust. Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't without verification." Blackwood reached into his coat, producing a folded paper. "This is a copy of military orders regarding Apache leaders. I took it from Clark's tent while trading ammunition. It confirms what I've told you." The document detailed preparations for what was euphemistically called decisive action against resistance leadership during the upcoming council. Colonel Jessup had indeed authorized a plan that amounted to authorized treachery. "I need to warn Cale," Maria whispered. "You need to be careful," Blackwood corrected. "The village watches you closely. Use the old Apache signal system, smoke patterns at dawn. Ghost Wolf scouts will see and understand." "How do you know all this?" Blackwood's weathered face softened. "Not all battles are fought with arrows and bullets. Some are won with information and patience." He pressed the bone card into her palm once more. "Keep this. If you need to reach me, show it to any trader from the Eastern Territories and mention the old fox. They'll get word to me." As silently as he had appeared in their village, Blackwood vanished back into the night, leaving Maria with a deadly secret and a small bone talisman that represented an unexpected alliance in increasingly complex times. Kyle watched the village from the sheltered ridge, motionless as the stones around him. 2 years of guerrilla warfare had honed his already keen patience into something almost supernatural. Village sentries had passed within yards without noticing his presence, a skill that had earned him the name Ghost Wolf among friends and enemies alike. Dawn painted the eastern sky in pale gold. From this vantage, he could see the entire settlement, the expanded fortifications, the military tents arrayed on the north side, the smoke rising from morning cook fires. Somewhere within those walls was Maria, the only reason he would risk approaching so closely. The smoke signal had come 3 days ago at first light. 3 small puffs, then 2 long streams, the ancient Apache warning of betrayal. Few settlers knew the signal system, and fewer still would risk using it. It had to be Maria. Movement at the village gate caught his attention, a small contingent departing on horseback, led by a blue uniformed officer. Lieutenant Clark, the military commander whose tactics had proven more effective than most. Gale's hand unconsciously moved to the scar along his ribs from their brief encounter 6 months earlier. With the patrol gone, he made his decision. He would enter the village openly, as he had once belonged there. The shock of his appearance might provide the moments needed to find Maria and confirm what the smoke signals suggested about the Peace Council. The weight of leadership had settled heavily on his shoulders since Abraham's death. The remaining Apache elders looked to him not just as a war chief, but increasingly as a voice for their future. 6 leaders had been invited to the council, including him, and the decision of whether to attend rested largely on his recommendation. Kyle descended the ridge, keeping to rock-strewn ground to minimize tracks. At the edge of the forest, he retrieved the bundle he'd hidden there, settler clothes he'd taken from a supply wagon months ago. The rough cotton shirt and worn trousers felt strange after so long in Apache buckskins, but they would draw less immediate attention. His hair he tied back tightly, though nothing could disguise the distinctive scar that crossed his cheekbone or the intensity of his gaze. Those who knew him would recognize him instantly. The question was whether they would raise the alarm. With deliberate calm, Kyle walked the final half-mile to the village gate. The young sentry, a boy he didn't recognize, straightened with surprise. "State your business," the youth demanded, trying to mask his nervousness. "Bringing information for Lieutenant Clark," Kyle replied, adopting the flat accent of mountain trappers. The sentry hesitated, then nodded toward the village square. He rode out with the dawn patrol. "You can wait at headquarters." Kyle moved through familiar streets now made strange by war. New buildings had risen, others had been reinforced with defensive positions. Villagers paused in their morning routines to watch him pass, something in his bearing triggering recognition even before they placed his face. Whispers followed him. "It's him, Ghost Wolf. Kale has returned." He ignored them, scanning for Maria while maintaining his unhurried pace. The square was busy with morning commerce, traders setting up, soldiers collecting supplies, women drawing water from the central well, and then he saw her. Maria stood outside the infirmary, sorting through herbs laid out to dry in the morning sun. She had grown thinner, her movements more measured. Her hair was tied back severely, practical for her work. But when she looked up and saw him, her face transformed with such naked emotion that Kale nearly faltered in his purposeful stride. Across the square, Thomas Miller emerged from the military headquarters. His eyes widened as he registered Kale's presence. "Raise the alarm," Thomas shouted. "Ghost Wolf is here!" Chaos erupted. Women grabbed children and fled indoors. Men reached for weapons. From all directions, soldiers converged on the square. Maria moved toward him, her expression shifting from shock to determination. They met in the center of the square as villagers pressed back against buildings, creating a strange island of calm amid the growing storm. "You shouldn't have come," she said quietly. "Your warning about the council. I had to be certain. It's a trap. They plan to eliminate all Apache leadership." Thomas arrived, rifle raised. "Step away from him, Maria." Kyle kept his eyes on Maria's face, memorizing every detail. In that moment he understood what he needed to do, not just for himself or for Maria, but for his people. "I know why you're here," she continued urgently. "But you need to leave now." "No!" His voice carried across the square with calm authority. "I came to speak with your leaders about peace. My people are tired of fighting, as I'm sure yours are." The gathering soldiers hesitated, confused by this unexpected declaration. Thomas moved closer, rifle still trained on Kale's chest. "You're a murderer, a butcher of soldiers." "I'm a warrior defending my homeland," Kyle replied evenly, "as you would defend yours." He slowly raised his empty hands. "But today I come unarmed, seeking dialogue." Maria's eyes questioned him, understanding there must be strategy behind this sudden reversal. From his shirt, Kale withdrew a folded paper, a document he had taken from a military courier the previous week. He handed it to Maria, ensuring others could see this was his only concealed item, the territorial governor's official invitation to the Peace Council. He explained, "I came to accept in person, to demonstrate good faith." The document was genuine, an ornate parchment bearing official seals and signatures. Maria unfolded it, revealing the flowing script that invited selected Apache leaders to discussions of lasting peace and mutual prosperity. As the soldiers surrounded them, Kale met her gaze one final time, conveying without words what he could not say aloud. "Trust me. This is the only way. Take him," Thomas ordered. "Lieutenant Clark will decide what to do with him when he returns." As rough hands seized his arms, Kyle maintained his dignity. He had anticipated this outcome, had planned for it. His capture would accomplish what months of fighting could not. Access to information about the military's true intentions, delivered through the one person they would never suspect of being his ally. The last thing he saw before being led away was Maria clutching the invitation, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. and a flash of metal at her throat, the mountain lion's claw still hanging from its leather cord after all this time. Lieutenant Clark's return to the village brought a storm unlike any Maria had witnessed. His face darkened to thundercloud proportions when he learned of Cale's capture and self-proclaimed peaceful intentions. "Where is he?" Clark demanded, striding into the makeshift jail where 2 soldiers stood guard. "Cell at the end," Thomas replied, falling into step beside the lieutenant. "He hasn't spoken since we locked him up." Maria followed at a distance, her medical bag a convenient excuse. "I should check him for injuries," she said, when Clark glanced back with suspicion. "After I'm finished." The lieutenant's voice left no room for argument. Through the small window in the door, Maria watched their confrontation. Cale sat on a rough wooden bench, back straight, expression impassive. He showed no fear, no anxiety, only calm assessment as Clark entered. "Ghost Wolf," Clark said, circling him slowly. "Your reputation precedes you. 15 confirmed kills, including some of my best men." Kyle remained silent. "You claim to come for peace talks, yet your warriors ambushed a supply train just 3 days ago." Clark stopped directly before him. "Explain the contradiction." "War continues until peace is formalized," Kyle replied simply. "My presence here demonstrates our willingness to end the fighting." Clark laughed without humor. "More likely, you're here to assess our defenses, or perhaps to martyr yourself and inflame your people further." "If I wanted to attack this village, I would not have walked through the front gate alone." The lieutenant studied him with cold calculation. "The territorial governor may be naive enough to believe in diplomatic solutions, but I know better. Men like you only understand force, men like me." Kyle's voice remained level. "You know nothing about me." "I know enough." Clark moved toward the door. "The Peace Council convenes in 2 weeks. Until then, you'll remain our guest, insurance against any further Apache aggression." After Clark departed, Maria insisted on examining the prisoner. "He took a blow to the head during capture," she explained to the guards. "Head wounds can turn fatal without proper care." Reluctantly, they allowed her entry, though they left the door open and watched carefully. "Their attention is on us," she murmured, tilting Cale's head to examine a superficial cut at his temple. "Why did you really come?" "I needed to confirm Blackwood's information about the council," he replied quietly, wincing convincingly as she cleaned the wound. "And to give you this." With movements hidden from the guard's view, he pressed something into her palm, a folded scrap of deerskin. "Apache scouts found a military courier. These are the true orders for the Peace Council." Maria slipped the deerskin into her apron pocket. "You allowed yourself to be captured intentionally, a calculated risk. They'll watch me closely but won't kill me. My death before the council would raise too many questions." His eyes met hers. "But now you're in greater danger as our only line of communication. I can handle myself." She bandaged his temple with deliberate care. "What is your actual plan?" "To attend their council and expose their treachery before all witnesses. If they intend peace, they'll prove it. If not, they'll be forced to show their hand, with neutral observers present." The guard shifted impatiently. Hurry it up, Miss Rivera." "Almost finished," she called back before whispering to Kyle. "Thomas suspects us. He watches me constantly. Thomas wants to believe you're innocent, that I've manipulated you." A ghost of a smile touched Kyle's lips. "Use that." That night, alone in her room, Maria carefully unfolded the deerskin document. Inside was a crudely drawn map showing military positions planned for the Peace Council. Armed men stationed behind false walls, sharpshooters on rooftops, mounted units positioned to cut off escape routes. The details confirmed everything Blackwood had warned about, with additional notes about specific targeting priorities. A separate piece of paper had been folded within, thinner, higher quality, clearly torn from a military logbook. On it was a list of Apache leaders, with annotations beside each name. Next to Cale's was a single word: capture. The others all read, eliminate. The evidence was damning, yet useless without a way to warn the other Apache leaders, while ensuring they didn't simply boycott the council altogether. Kale's strategy required their presence, but with forewarning and countermeasures. A soft knock at her window startled her. Maria quickly hid the documents beneath her mattress before approaching cautiously. Noshi's young face appeared in the moonlight. "Ghostwolf said you would have a message," he whispered. "It's too dangerous. The patrols. Already avoided." His confidence had grown since his capture months ago. "What must I tell our people?" Maria made a quick decision. The council is a trap, but Kale wants it to proceed. The Apache must come prepared with their own surprise. She described the military's positions based on the map. They need to appear to fall into the trap while having their own forces concealed nearby. Noshi nodded, memorizing every detail. As he prepared to leave, Maria impulsively handed him a small object, a locket containing her mother's portrait, the only valuable she possessed. "If I'm discovered, I'll have no warning," she said. "This signals that any future message from me cannot be trusted." After Noshi departed, Maria sat at her small desk and began a different kind of documentation. For hours, she carefully copied the military's plans onto paper hidden beneath innocent medical notes. These she would distribute strategically, to Blackwood, to sympathetic settlers, even sending one by post to a newspaper in the territorial capital. If treachery occurred at the Peace Council, there would be evidence that could not be easily destroyed. Dawn found her exhausted, but resolved. As she hid the final copy beneath a loose floorboard, something caught her eye, a small cloth sack she hadn't noticed before. Wedged between the floor joists, inside was a leather-wrapped object the size of her palm. Unwrapping it carefully, she found a double-sided stone disc, smooth from years of handling. One side bore the carving of a mountain lion, the other a wolf. The craftsmanship was unmistakably Apache. The stone itself an unusual blue-green, only found in the high mountain sacred sites. A small folded paper accompanied it, with a message in Kyle's distinctive hand: "Spirit stone, passed through 15 generations of my mother's line. Carrying it means you speak with the voice of my ancestors. When the moment comes to choose between truth and safety, this will give you courage. You are my heart, regardless of what happens next." Maria pressed the stone against her chest, its weight and coolness somehow comforting. In the growing morning light, she made her final preparations for whatever dangerous days lay ahead. Days that would determine not just her future with Kale, but the fate of two peoples locked in a conflict that had spiraled far beyond their control. Days passed in a strange dance of deception. Maria moved through the village with a carefully constructed normalcy, treating patients, gathering herbs, attending community meals. Yet beneath this routine, she'd become someone else entirely, a collector of whispers, a counter of ammunition crates, a mapper of soldier rotations. "You look tired," Lieutenant Clark commented one evening as she finished bandaging his saddle-chafed palm. His tone carried unexpected gentleness. "The demands of caring for both village and garrison must be wearing on you." "I manage well enough," she replied, packing her supplies. "I've requested a military doctor from Fort Denison," he said. "You shouldn't bear this burden alone." Maria forced a grateful smile. "That's thoughtful of you. Perhaps when he arrives you might join me for dinner." Clark's invitation hung in the air, surprising them both. She hesitated, calculating rapidly. Closer access to Clark could mean better information, yet it would complicate her already perilous position. "That would be pleasant," she finally answered. The lieutenant's rare smile transformed his stern features. "Excellent. I look forward to conversation beyond military matters." As Maria left headquarters, she passed the makeshift jail where Kyle was held. No opportunities for communication had arisen in days. The guards were under strict orders after Clark had noticed their prolonged medical examination. Miss Rivera. Thomas Miller stepped from the shadows, startling her. In recent days, he had watched her with increasing suspicion, his childhood affection warring with growing doubts. "Thomas, you surprised me. Deliberate, I'm afraid." His expression was troubled. "I've been wanting to speak with you privately." They walked toward the edge of the village, stopping at the old church. damaged during an early skirmish and now rarely used. Inside, dust motes danced in the light from high windows. "I saw you at the jail again yesterday," Thomas said without preamble. "The guards say you've requested to check on him daily." "I'm responsible for all patients, Thomas. Even prisoners. Is that all it is?" "Professional duty." His eyes searched hers. "We've known each other since childhood, Maria. I'd like to think that counts for something." "Of course it does." She touched his arm gently. "You've been a good friend. Then as your friend, I'm asking you to be careful. Lieutenant Clark is more observant than he appears. He's noticed your interest in the prisoner." Alarm flickered through her. "Has he said something?" "Not directly. But I've served with him long enough to recognize when he's watching someone." Thomas lowered his voice. "Whatever your feelings for Cale once were, they cannot matter now. He's Ghost Wolf, responsible for killing our neighbors, our friends. People have died on both sides of this conflict," Maria said carefully. "That may be true, but we must choose sides eventually." Thomas took her hand. "I've never stopped caring for you, Maria, even after everything. I could protect you if you would only let me." The genuine emotion in his voice touched her unexpectedly. In another life, perhaps Thomas would have been enough, a good man, dedicated and true. But her heart had made its choice long ago, beside a mountain creek. "Thank you," she said softly. "But I need no protection." As they exited the church, Maria noticed new activity at headquarters. A messenger had arrived, dust-covered and urgent. Lieutenant Clark emerged, reading a dispatch with darkening expression. "What's happening?" she asked Thomas. "Probably news about the peace delegation. They're due to arrive within days." His tone suggested skepticism about the entire process. That night, unable to sleep, Maria crept downstairs and carefully pried up the loose floorboard beneath the kitchen table. Here she had created her most secure hiding place, a hollow that now contained the military maps, Blackwood's bone-playing card, and her growing collection of intelligence. She added a new document, her careful notes from observations throughout the day, including guard rotations and the late-night dispatch. As she replaced the board, something caught her eye in the dim moonlight, a fine thread stretched across the floorboards. Now broken by her actions, someone had been checking her hiding place, heart pounding. Maria quickly gathered the most incriminating documents. She needed a new location immediately. After a moment's consideration, she remembered the old stone wall behind her herb garden. One section had crumbled years ago, creating a natural cavity. Outside, the night was clear and cool. The village quiet, except for the measured tread of sentries. Maria moved through shadows, with skills honed from months of secret communications. At the garden wall, she quickly transferred the documents into a small metal box she'd been using for seed storage, nestling it deep within the cavity and replacing the stones carefully. As she turned to leave, moonlight glinted on something half-buried in the soft earth of the herb bed, something that hadn't been there when she'd tended the garden that morning. Cautiously, she brushed away the soil to reveal a shallow tin, the kind soldiers used for tobacco. Inside was a precisely folded piece of paper and an object that made her breath catch. A military identification tag with the name Corporal James Hayes stamped into the metal. Maria recognized it immediately. Hayes had been among the first soldiers killed in Cale's raids. His death particularly brutal, according to reports. The note contained a single line of neat handwriting. "Choose your loyalties carefully. Some secrets once discovered cannot be forgiven." There was no signature, but the message was clear. Someone knew of her activities and was warning her, perhaps offering one chance to change course before exposing her. The dog tag served as both threat and reminder of the blood already spilled. Maria returned to the house, the cold metal pressed against her palm. Sleep would not come now. Instead, she sat by her window, watching the stars wheel across the sky, weighing impossible choices as dawn approached. The peace delegation would arrive in 3 days. Cale remained imprisoned, a bargaining chip in Clark's careful strategy, and now an unknown observer had marked her as a traitor. The fragile web of deception she had maintained was unraveling thread by thread. Maria slipped the dog, tag onto a thin cord and hung it around her neck. Alongside the mountain, Lion Claw, a strange pairing of totems representing the divided halves of her existence. The cool metal against her skin would serve as a constant reminder that discovery was only one misstep away. The peace delegation arrived with the dawn, 3 men in formal attire escorted by a small cavalry unit. They brought with them an air of officialdom and the weight of territorial authority. Maria watched from the infirmary window as Lieutenant Clark greeted them with military precision, while village elders stood by in their Sunday best. Among the delegation was a familiar face, James Blackwood, now dressed in a respectable suit rather than trader's garb. His presence suggested deeper connections than he had initially revealed. When his gaze briefly met Maria's across the square, he gave no sign of recognition. "Quite the spectacle," said Thomas, appearing beside her. His expression was unreadable. "Peace, at last, if the politicians have their way. Isn't that what everyone wants?" She asked carefully. "Peace has different meanings to different people." He studied her face. "For some, it means surrender, disguised as compromise." The delegation was escorted to Elder Burton's home, the largest in the village, and hastily converted to suitable accommodations. Preparations for the council had transformed the community. Streets swept clean, buildings repaired. Signs of military presence somewhat minimized for diplomatic purposes. Maria's father called her home for midday meal, something increasingly rare as her duties expanded. She found him unusually somber. "You've been invited to the formal dinner tonight," he said as they ate. "The delegation specifically requested your presence, given your role caring for both communities." "I'm honored," she replied, though anxiety flickered through her. "More visibility meant more scrutiny. Lieutenant Clark suggested you might wear your mother's blue dress." Her father's gaze was pointed. "He seems to hold you in high regard." Maria set down her fork. "The lieutenant is a complicated man, as is the Apache prisoner." Her father's voice hardened. "Thomas came to see me this morning, Maria. He's concerned about your sympathies." The moment stretched between them, decades of love and respect suddenly strained by unspoken accusations. "My sympathies are with those who suffer," she finally said. "On all sides, there comes a time when neutrality becomes betrayal of those who trust you." He pushed away from the table. "Your mother would have wanted you to make choices that keep you safe." After he left, Maria sat alone, the weight of his words settling around her. The walls of her carefully constructed double life were closing in. That afternoon brought another development. A military doctor arrived from Fort Denison, immediately taking over most of Maria's duties. Though ostensibly sent to assist her, the effect was to restrict her access to headquarters, the jail, and by extension to Kale. As dusk approached, Maria dressed for the delegation dinner with careful consideration. The blue dress her father had mentioned had been her mother's, a beautiful, impractical thing rarely worn and certainly not suitable for sending messages. Instead, she chose a simpler brown dress, beneath which she could wear the mountain lion claw and Hayes's dog tag concealed. A knock at her bedroom door startled her. "Maria?" Her father's voice. "There's someone here to see you." Downstairs waited Thomas, dressed in his formal military attire. "I've come to escort you to the dinner," he said, his manner stiff and formal. The walk to Elder Burton's house was silent and uncomfortable. Other villagers streamed toward the same destination. The delegation dinner had become a community event, the largest gathering since the Harvest Festival, where she and Cale had first kissed. Inside, the atmosphere was carefully orchestrated conviviality. Lieutenant Clark greeted them, his eyes lingering on Maria with unmistakable interest. The delegation members circulated, making diplomatic small talk, while servants brought platters of food far more elaborate than the village had seen in months. Blackwood approached her while Thomas was distracted with military colleagues. "The Apache leadership arrives tomorrow," he murmured, seeming to comment on the roast beef. "Ghost Wolf will be permitted to attend under guard. Is the plan proceeding?" She whispered, "with modifications. Be ready for Miss Rivera." Lieutenant Clark appeared beside them. "I see you've met Mr. Blackwood, our territorial commerce liaison." "Indeed," she smiled. "We were discussing medicinal herbs that might be traded more extensively when peace is established." Clark's expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "The governor's representatives would like to speak with you about your unique position in the community. Perhaps you'd join us." As Clark led her away, Maria glanced back to see Thomas watching her intently, his conversation with Blackwood clearly tense. The dinner proceeded with speeches about prosperity and cooperation. Beneath the platitudes, Maria sensed currents of deception. These men spoke of peace while preparing for treachery. She played her part carefully, answering questions about village life and her medical work while revealing nothing of importance. As the gathering concluded, she made her excuses and slipped away early. The night air felt clean after the stifling atmosphere inside. Rather than heading home, Maria walked toward her herb garden, needing space to think clearly about tomorrow's challenges. The garden lay peaceful under moonlight. She knelt among the familiar plants, drawing comfort from their quiet resilience. A soft sound behind her, a footstep, made her turn quickly. Thomas stood watching her, his expression conflicted. "You followed me," she said simply. "Yes." He moved closer. "I've been following you for days, Maria." Her heart stuttered. "Why?" "Because I needed to be certain." He knelt beside her in the dirt, heedless of his uniform. "I found your hiding place beneath the floorboard. Thomas, I saw the maps." "The notes." His voice was painfully quiet. "You've been helping him all along. Denial would be pointless." "You left the dog tag." He nodded once. "I hoped it might make you reconsider. Make you remember what he's done, who he's killed. What will you do now?" she asked, strange calm settling over her. Thomas looked away. "Lieutenant Clark already knows. I told him this morning. The world seemed to stop." "Everything?" "Everything I discovered." His eyes, when they met hers again, held genuine anguish. "I'm sorry, Maria, I truly am. But your actions are treasonous. People could die because of information you've passed. People will certainly die if the military's trap succeeds," she countered, anger finally breaking through her composure. "The Peace Council is a sham. That's what he's convinced you, but I've seen the orders, Thomas. The plans for ambush positions, the lists marking Apache leaders for elimination." Confusion crossed his features. "What orders? What lists?" Before she could respond, torchlight appeared at the garden entrance. Lieutenant Clark approached, flanked by 4 soldiers. His expression was coldly triumphant. "Maria Rivera," he announced formally, "you are under arrest for espionage and providing aid to the enemy." As the soldiers moved to seize her, Maria's hand closed around something half buried in the soil, a small leather pouch she hadn't noticed before. She managed to slip it into her pocket before they pulled her to her feet. "Search her," Clark ordered. Rough hands discovered both necklaces, the mountain lion claw and Hayes's dog tag. Clark examined them with raised eyebrows. "Interesting choices of jewelry for a healer," he remarked, pocketing them. "Take her to headquarters for questioning. I want to know everything she's told the Apache before tomorrow's council." As they led her away, Maria saw Thomas standing motionless among her trampled herbs, the torchlight illuminating the anguish on his face. Whatever he had expected when reporting his suspicions, this formal military arrest wasn't it. She had become a prisoner of war in her own village. In the chaos of her arrest, no one noticed the small pouch now hidden in the folds of her dress, a final message or tool that might yet change the course of events. If only she could discover its purpose in time. The military headquarters had been converted into an interrogation room, sparse and intimidating. Maria sat alone, hands bound before her, the hours of questioning having left her throat raw and her spirit battered but unbroken. Lieutenant Clark had been methodical, alternating between threats and false sympathy, trying to extract details about Apache positions and plans. She had given him nothing. Dawn light now filtered through the single high window. The Peace Council would convene at midday. Whatever chance remained to prevent the planned massacre was slipping away with each passing hour. The door opened to reveal Thomas, carrying a tray with bread and water. His face showed evidence of a sleepless night, eyes shadowed with regret. "You have 10 minutes," the guard said before closing the door. Thomas set the tray down carefully. "Are you all right? Did they hurt you? Why are you here?" Maria's voice was hoarse from hours of interrogation. "To tell you they're moving you to Fort Denison after the council." He lowered his voice. "Clark doesn't want your father or the village elders interfering with military justice." "Military justice," she repeated bitterly. "Is that what you call ambushing people who come to negotiate peace?" Thomas glanced at the door. "I didn't know about any ambush plans, Maria. I still don't. But your actions, the maps, the messages, I couldn't ignore them." "So you reported me without asking for my explanation?" What explanation could possibly justify spying for the Apache? His voice cracked slightly. For him? Maria studied the man she'd known since childhood, honest, dependable Thomas, who saw the world in straightforward terms of duty and loyalty. "You really don't know, do you? About the military's true plans for the council?" Uncertainty flickered across his face. "Lieutenant Clark says they're prepared for treachery, nothing more. Look in his field desk. Top right drawer. There's a red leather folder with the colonel's seal. I can't just... If you ever cared for me at all. Thomas, look in that folder before the council begins." She leaned forward, intensity burning through her exhaustion. "Then decide if you've chosen the right side." Their conversation was interrupted by sounds of commotion outside. Shouting, running footsteps, the unmistakable crack of a rifle shot. Thomas moved to the door, peering through its small window. "Apache raid at the north perimeter," he said, tension evident in his voice. "They're pulling guards from all posts." The diversion Kyle had planned, it was happening despite his imprisonment. Hope flickered to life in Maria's chest. "I have to go," Thomas said, already reaching for the door. "Wait!" Maria caught his sleeve with her bound hands. "Whatever you believe about me, about Kale, innocent people will die today if the military's plan proceeds. I'm begging you to look in that folder." Something in her desperation reached him. He nodded once before disappearing into the growing chaos. Left alone, Maria worked quickly. The small leather pouch she'd managed to conceal during her arrest now lay open before her. Inside, she had found a curious object, a small glass vial sealed with wax, containing what appeared to be crushed charcoal. A scrap of paper had accompanied it with a single Apache word: Sunau, freedom. She recognized it immediately, a specialized preparation used by Apache hunters when tracking wounded prey. The charcoal would create dense, disorienting smoke when exposed to flame. The distant sounds of fighting intensified. The headquarters had emptied of all but essential personnel, most rushing to defend against the diversion. Maria moved to the stone fireplace at the room's edge, where embers still glowed from the night's fire. With bound hands, she managed to add kindling from the nearby basket, coaxing the embers back to flame. The wax seal on the vial melted quickly in the fire's heat. Maria poured the contents directly onto the flames, then scrambled back as thick, acrid smoke erupted in a sudden plume, far denser than ordinary charcoal would produce. It filled the room with remarkable speed, billowing toward the ceiling before cascading down the walls. She dropped to the floor where the air remained clearer, working at her bonds against the rough edge of a floorboard. The leather cord began to fray. The door burst open, a guard stumbling in with a bandana pressed to his face. "Oh, what the hell?" He disappeared into the smoke, coughing violently. Maria's bonds finally gave way. She crawled toward the door, staying beneath the worst of the smoke. The hallway beyond was chaos, guards rushing to find the source of the smoke now pouring from multiple rooms. The Apache mixture having spread through the building's ventilation. Using the confusion as cover, she made her way toward the building's rear exit. Freedom was tantalizingly close, but she couldn't leave without warning the Apache delegation about the ambush. And she couldn't leave without Kyle. A hand seized her arm, yanking her into a side corridor. Maria fought instinctively until she recognized her captor, Thomas, his face streaked with soot and something else. Determination. "You were right," he said, voice barely audible over the commotion. "I found the folder. The orders—" He shook his head, still processing the betrayal. "This isn't what I fought for." He pressed something cold and heavy into her palm, an iron key. "Cell block, last door on the left. They've moved him for the council. Thomas, go quickly. I'll create another distraction." His eyes held hers for a moment. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you." The cell block was minimally guarded, most soldiers responding to the twin emergencies of the Apache raid and the smoke-filled headquarters. The single remaining guard lay unconscious, Thomas's work presumably. The key turned smoothly in the lock of the final cell. Inside, Kyle sat perfectly still, as if he'd been expecting her. His eyes widened slightly at her disheveled appearance. "The diversion worked better than planned," he said, rising smoothly. "We have little time." Maria scanned the hallway nervously. "The Apache delegation already warned?" Kyle moved past her, checking the corridor. "No, she reached them before they entered the valley. They come prepared for Clark's treachery. Then why proceed with the council at all? Because exposing their dishonor before official witnesses is more powerful than avoiding it." His hand found hers, squeezing briefly. "We need to reach the council grounds. The territorial governor's representatives must see what their military plans to do in their name." As they slipped from the jail, Maria pressed the empty vial into Kyle's hand. "Your message saved me." He looked momentarily confused. "I sent no vial, but the Apache smoke mixture." "A gift from an ally, then?" His expression shifted to one of grim determination. "We have many who work from shadow." Together they moved through the village, using the chaos of the raid as cover. The council was set to begin within the hour, and with it, the potential for either bloodshed or a true chance at peace. The council grounds lay a quarter-mile east of the village, a natural clearing surrounded by ancient cottonwoods. By tradition, it was neutral territory where tribal councils had met for generations before settlers arrived. Now it had been transformed with a large canopy tent, military perimeter, and carefully arranged seating for the delegates. Maria and Kale approached cautiously, using the forest for cover. The Apache diversion had served its purpose, drawing soldiers to the northern boundary, but the council grounds remained guarded. From their vantage point, they could see the territorial delegation arriving, followed by village elders and military officers, including Lieutenant Clark in full-dress uniform. "The Apache delegation?" Maria whispered. "Will arrive from the east." Kale's eyes scanned the perimeter. "The council begins with the sun at its highest point." As if summoned by his words, movement appeared at the clearing's eastern edge. 6 Apache men emerged from the tree line, unarmed as required by the terms of the council. Maria recognized several tribal elders, their bearing dignified despite the tension evident in their posture. "They know about the trap," she confirmed. Kyle nodded. "And have positioned warriors in the surrounding forest. If Clark moves against them, it will not be the easy slaughter he planned. More bloodshed helps no one." Maria touched the spirit stone disc hanging at her throat, recovered from her hiding place on their way to the clearing. "There must be another way. The territorial governor's representatives are the key," Kyle said. "If they witness the military's treachery, they cannot sanction it without political consequences." They watched as formal introductions began beneath the canopy. Lieutenant Clark's stance was rigid, his hand never straying far from his sidearm. The Apache leaders maintained careful neutrality, though their eyes constantly assessed potential threats. "We need to get closer," Maria decided. Moving stealthily through the underbrush, they circled toward the rear of the canopy, where a small creek provided both cover and access. As they approached, Maria suddenly clutched Kale's arm. Look, through a gap in the canvas, they could see Thomas positioned among the military contingent. His expression was grave as Lieutenant Clark rose to address the gathering. "Honored representatives, tribal leaders," Clark began, his voice carrying across the clearing. "Today marks a historic opportunity for lasting peace in these territories." The formal pleasantries continued, each side making carefully crafted statements about cooperation and mutual respect. Maria recognized the choreography of diplomacy, words designed to sound meaningful while committing to nothing. Then the tone shifted. One of the Apache elders, Greyhorse, a respected medicine man, stood to speak. "We come in peace, but not in blindness," he stated in careful English. "Before these talks proceed, we must address the matter of military positions surrounding this council ground." Clark's expression hardened. "Standard security procedures. Sharpshooters on the ridge and mounted units hidden in the western gully are not security," Greyhorse countered. "They are preparation for ambush." Murmurs erupted among the territorial delegates. The lead representative, a silver-haired man named Harrington, turned questioning eyes to Clark. "Lieutenant, is this accurate?" "Apache paranoia," Clark dismissed. Though their accusation raises questions about their own intentions, the tension thickened. Maria could see the moment balancing on a knife's edge. Either side could trigger the violence that seemed increasingly inevitable. "Now," Kyle whispered. Rising from their hiding place, they emerged together. Maria still wearing her torn and soot-stained dress from captivity, Kale in prisoner's garb. Their appearance caused immediate commotion. Soldiers raised rifles, delegates stood in alarm, and Lieutenant Clark's hand moved to his gun. "Hold your fire!" Thomas's voice cut through the chaos, stepping forward with unexpected authority. "What is the meaning of this?" Harrington demanded. Maria addressed him directly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Governor's Representative Harrington, I bring evidence of military plans to use these peace talks as cover for eliminating Apache leadership." Clark moved toward her, fury etched in his features. "This woman is under arrest for treason. She has no standing here." "I have the standing of truth," Maria countered, pulling from her pocket the crumpled military orders Thomas had given her during their escape. "These are Colonel Jessup's direct orders regarding this council." Harrington hesitated, then extended his hand for the document. As Clark moved to intercept, Thomas stepped between them. "Let him see it, Lieutenant," Thomas said quietly. "Unless you have something to hide." The clearing fell silent as Harrington read, his expression darkening. "These orders authorize the elimination of Apache leadership under the guise of peace negotiations." He looked up, shock evident in his face. "This bears Colonel Jessup's signature and seal." "Forgeries," Clark insisted, though uncertainty had crept into his voice. "I can attest to their authenticity," Thomas stated formally. "I found them in Lieutenant Clark's field desk this morning." The revelation hung in the air like gunsmoke. Harrington conferred urgently with the other delegates, while Clark stood rigid, with barely controlled rage. "This council is suspended," Harrington announced finally. "Lieutenant Clark, you are relieved of command pending investigation into these accusations." "You have no authority," Clark began. "I speak with the governor's voice," Harrington cut him off. "And I will not have this administration associated with such dishonorable tactics," as if sensing the changing tide. Clark made a desperate move, drawing his pistol and aiming directly at Kale. "This man is responsible for the deaths of dozens of soldiers. Whatever our plans, his execution is justice." Maria didn't hesitate. She stepped in front of Kale, shielding him with her body. "Maria, no!" Thomas lunged forward. The gunshot cracked across the clearing. Time seemed to slow as Maria waited for pain that didn't come. Instead, she saw Clark stagger backward, a bloom of red spreading across his chest. He looked down in confusion before collapsing to his knees. Behind him stood James Blackwood, a small derringer still smoking in his hand. "The woman has suffered enough for your ambitions, Lieutenant." Soldiers surrounded Clark as he slumped to the ground. The Apache delegates had drawn together defensively, watching the chaos unfold with wary assessment. "This changes nothing," Greyhorse declared into the stunned silence. "Blood has been spilled on council grounds." "Not by Apache hands," Blackwood pointed out, setting his weapon down carefully. "And not by those seeking honest peace." From his shirt, he withdrew an object that gleamed gold in the sunlight. An intricate medallion bearing the territorial governor's seal and attached to a purple ribbon. "I am empowered as the governor's special envoy." Blackwood announced, holding the medallion for all to see. My public role as trader was cover to assess the true situation here without military interference. He turned to Harrington. Your delegation was meant to observe while I conducted the actual negotiations. Once I determined whether peace was genuinely possible, the revelation transformed the gathering. Soldiers looked to their commanders for direction while the Apache elders conferred among themselves. The council will reconvene tomorrow, Blackwood declared. With honest terms and transparent intentions from all sides, his eyes found Maria and Kyle, and with all voices represented. As medical attention was summoned for Clark, Blackwood approached them privately. You two have risked everything for this moment, he said quietly. Without your courage, today would have ended very differently. He pressed the governor's medallion into Maria's hand. Hold this until tomorrow. It represents the authority and honor of the territorial government, both nearly sacrificed. Today for military ambition, the heavy gold disc symbolized something Maria had almost stopped, believing in the possibility that justice and truth might still prevail in a world torn by conflict and deception. 6 months passed, like a river finding new channels after a storm. Autumn painted the valley in crimson and gold, the harvest plentiful despite the upheavals of spring and summer. The Peace Council had reconvened as promised, this time with genuine negotiations that stretched over weeks of difficult but honest dialogue. The territorial governor had arrived personally after Blackwood's reports, bringing enough authority to override military objections. Lieutenant Clark had survived his wound, only to face court-martial for his actions. Colonel Jessup had been reassigned to a remote outpost where his ambitions would find fewer outlets. The final peace agreement recognized Apache sovereignty over their ancestral lands, while establishing clear boundaries and protocols for resolving future disputes. More importantly, it acknowledged past wrongs and created pathways toward mutual understanding. Maria stood on the porch of the small cabin she now called home, watching golden light filter through the pines. Built where the creek divided the territories, half on settler land, half on Apache ground, it represented the bridge she and Cale had become in the months since the council. Her father had not spoken to her for weeks after her actions were made public. The village had been divided in their judgment, some seeing heroism in preventing a massacre, others viewing her as a traitor to her own people. But time and the visible benefits of peace had softened many hearts, thinking deep thoughts. Gale's voice interrupted her reflection as he approached from checking his trap lines. 2 rabbits hung from his belt, dinner for the night, remembering, she replied. Sometimes it feels like another lifetime. He set down his gear and joined her on the porch, his presence solid and reassuring beside her. Marriage had been their first act after the peace was signed, a ceremony that combined Apache traditions and settler customs, attended by supporters from both communities. Some had boycotted the union, but enough had come to give them hope for the future. Noshi brought news, Kyle said. The Eastern Apache bands have sent representatives to see how our peace agreement functions. They're considering similar negotiations in their territories, Maria smiled. Good news travels even in these mountains, as does your reputation. 3 settlers from the northern valley came yesterday while you were gathering herbs. Their child has the fever. Her skills as a healer had become sought after by both communities, her unique combination of settler medicine and Apache traditions proving effective, where either approach alone might fail. She had begun training apprentices from both cultures, ensuring the knowledge would survive beyond her lifetime. I'll prepare remedies to send with you tomorrow, she said. A rider appeared on the path leading to their cabin, Thomas Miller, now serving as liaison between the communities. His initial discomfort around them had gradually given way to a respectful friendship. His testimony at Clark's court-martial had been crucial in establishing the truth. Maria, Kyle, he greeted them, dismounting. Territorial mail came through. Thought you'd want this right away. He handed Maria an official-looking envelope bearing the governor's seal. She opened it carefully, reading the formal language with growing wonder. They've approved the trading post. she announced, looking up with shining eyes. And the school. It had been their proposal, a trading post at the territory's crossroads, where Apache and settlers could exchange goods fairly, without exploitation. Alongside it, a school where children from both communities would learn each other's languages and traditions while mastering the skills needed for a changing world. The governor has allocated funds for construction, Maria continued, and appointed us as joint administrators. Kyle took the document, his expression thoughtful. Words on paper. The real work comes next. When doesn't it? She responded with a smile. After Thomas departed with the news, they prepared the evening meal together in comfortable silence. As twilight gathered, a soft cry from the cradle in the corner drew Maria's attention. Their son, just 2 months old, had awakened, tiny fists waving in the air. His copper skin was a shade lighter than his father's, his dark eyes already observant of the world around him. They had named him Abraham, honoring the village elder who had first bridged the two worlds by taking in an orphaned Apache boy. Maria lifted him gently, bringing him to the porch where Cale waited. The three of them watched the first stars appear over the valley that had seen so much bloodshed and now held such fragile promise. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "The path that brought us here?" Cale considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "The path had much pain," he finally answered, "but the destination—" He touched his son's cheek with a gentle finger. "No, I have no regrets." From inside the cabin came the soft tap of the door opening to the evening breeze. Maria had left it unlatched, knowing who would come. Her father stood in the doorway, hesitant despite previous visits. In his arms, he carried a carefully wrapped bundle. Their relationship remained tender, healing slowly with each small gesture of reconciliation. "I thought the boy might be ready for this," he said, unwrapping the object. "I've been working on it for a while." In his weathered hands lay a cradle board of traditional Apache design, but with subtle elements of European craftsmanship. The wood had been lovingly shaped, polished to a warm glow, and decorated with symbols from both cultures, protective totems and Christian crosses coexisting in the intricate carvings. "It's beautiful," Maria whispered, recognizing the hours of labor and the deeper meaning behind the gift. "A child should know where he comes from," her father said simply. "All of where he comes from." He demonstrated how the cradle board could be secured for carrying or propped for sleeping. "The Apache ways of carrying children make good sense in this country, practical. I added some features I thought might improve it, though." Kyle examined the craftsmanship with genuine appreciation. "You honor our son," he said formally, extending his hand in the settler tradition of handshakes. After a moment's hesitation, Maria's father accepted the gesture, the two men's hands clasped in the space between their worlds. Later, with Abraham sleeping soundly in his new cradle board and her father gone home, with promises to return soon, Maria stood in the doorway of their cabin. From this threshold between inside and outside, between settler construction and Apache positioning, she could see both the village lights in the valley and the Apache fires in the hills. "We've created something new," she said, as Cale joined her. "Something that wasn't possible before. Something that will outlive us," he agreed. His arm encircling her waist, the cradle board gleamed in the firelight. Its hybrid design a perfect metaphor for the child who would grow up neither fully Apache nor fully settler, but something altogether new. Their son would face challenges they couldn't imagine, carrying both the weight of history and the possibility of transformation. But he would not face these challenges alone, nor would he walk a path others had not begun to clear. The carved wood that cradled him told that story, of hands from different traditions working together to create something stronger and more beautiful than either could have crafted alone.